Hello, how's everybody doing today? Today we're going to talk about the order of operations. All right, to use the order of operations, we remember it by using GEMDAS. Right? And each letter of GEMDAS represents something. So the G in GEMDAS stands for groupings. All right, and groupings could be things like parentheses, it could be brackets, or it can even be absolute value bars, which are these straight up and down bars. Those are all groupings. The E in GEMDAS stands for exponents. And exponents could be, you have a base number, so let's say we have a 3, and like an exponent's a little raised number above it. So this would be 3 to the 4th power. Another way we can see exponents would be like a variable, and then another exponent, a little raised number above it. So this would be x to the 2nd power, or x squared. On the exponent step, we can also do the square root symbol, because the square root symbol has the same power as an exponent. They get done at the same step. The M and the D in GEMDAS stands for multiply or divide. Multiply or divide. And if you can see here, we have an arrow going left to right. That's because if we're working out a problem, we work from left to right, and whatever comes first is what we do. All right? And then the A and the S for GEMDAS is add or subtract. And you can see we also have a little arrow above the A and the S. So that means we work from left to right. Whatever comes first is what we do. All right, so I have an order of operations problem here. So what I do to help myself out is I write GEMDAS down the side of my paper to help me remember my steps. So I write GE and then MD and I draw a little arrow above it, and then AS and I draw a little arrow above it. That helps me know I go from left to right. Okay, so my first step, groupings. Do I have any groupings? I do. I have these parentheses, so I have to solve those parentheses first. 5 minus 3 is 2, and then I can bring everything else down. So then I'm done with my groupings. My next step I see is E, exponents. Do I have any exponents? I do. I have an exponent right here of 3, so I can do 2 to the 3rd power. 2 to the 3rd power is 2 times 2 times 2, which gives me 8. And then I can bring everything else down, because I don't have any other exponents. Oh wait, I do have another exponent. I have a squared root. I can do that in my exponent step. So the square root of 16 is 4. And then I can bring everything else down. So now I'm done with my exponents. So now I'm going to multiply or divide, and I read from left to right. So if I read from left to right, I see I have 4 minus 8 divided by 8. All right, so I have a division sign here, so I have to do that. 8 divided by 8 gives me 1. So I'm left with 4 minus 1. And I'm done with multiply and divide. My next step says add or subtract. We'll only have subtract, so I have to just do 4 minus 1, and 4 minus 1 gives me 3. So 3 is my final answer. All right, my next problem. I wrote GEMDAS down the side of my paper. So I'm going to look at here, do I have any groupings? I do. I have a bracket, and then I have parentheses. So when I have a parentheses inside the bracket, I have to do those parentheses first. So 6 minus 4 gives me 2, and then I can bring everything else down. All right, now I'm still inside of this grouping because it's inside these brackets. So I have to look in there and say, what do I do first? Am I going to subtract first? Am I going to add first? Or am I going to do the exponent first? Looking at GEMDAS, exponent comes before add and subtract. So I'm going to do my exponent. 2 to the 3rd power gives me 8, because 2 times 2 times 2 gives me 8. And then I can bring everything else down. So I'm still inside this bracket, so I'm going to write these brackets, and then I have a 4 on the outside. So now I'm still inside these brackets, and I have a subtract and an add. So I do it from left to right. So the subtract comes first, so I'm going to do that first. 8 minus 8 is 0, and that leaves me with 0 plus 1, and 0 plus 1 is 1. That's still inside that bracket, so I'm going to write that bracket, and I have a 4 on the outside. Okay, when a number is next to a parentheses or next to a bracket, that means multiply. So 4 times 1 gives me 4, and that is my final answer. All right, you might see a problem like this when you do order of operations, where it's a big fraction bar. And we can still do order of operations and solve this problem. But first we're going to have to solve the top of the fraction, and then solve the bottom of the fraction, and then divide or simplify the fraction. Okay, so first, I'm going to solve this top part of the fraction, the numerator. Do I have any groupings? I do. I have 10 minus 7. Well, 10 minus 7 is inside the parentheses, and 10 minus 7 gives me 3. So I'm still working on the top of this fraction here. So now I have 3 to the third power, or 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 times 3 gives me 27. So I've solved the top of my fraction bar. Now I can solve the bottom of the fraction bar, just still by using GEMDAS. So I'm looking, do I have groupings? I do, it's all in a grouping. So I have to do this whole thing. My next step is exponents. I see I have an exponent here of 5 squared. Well, 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25, and then I can bring everything else down. So now I have multiply or divide. Do I have any multiply or divide? I do not, so I'm done with that step. Now I go on to add and subtract, and I go from left to right. So I go reading from left to right, I see a subtract sign first, so I'm going to do that first. 28 minus 25 gives me 3. And then I can bring down that plus 6, and 3 plus 6 gives me 9. So the bottom of my fraction I got was 9. Well, a fraction bar in math really means divide. So for my final answer, I can divide the numerator, or the top number we solved for, and divide it by the denominator, or the bottom number we solved for. So 27 divided by 9 gives me 3. So my final answer will be 3. So remember, order of operations, we remember it by GEMDAS, and we can, first the G is groupings, so parentheses, brackets, absolute value bars, any of that stuff is done under the groupings. Exponents, we can have a number with a base, like 3 to the 4th power, or we can have a square root sign. Either of those we do during the exponent step. Multiply or divide is just multiply or divide, but we do it from left to right. Whatever comes first is what we do first. And then we have add or subtract at the end, and the same thing, we go from left to right, and we solve the one that comes first. All right, that was order of operations. That's what we're going to be working on this week.